If we are all talking about his crazy and offensive comments, if we were talking about the circus, then we're not talking about everything else. Because there's a whole lot that he doesn't want us and doesn't want you to be talking about right now. I mean, he doesn't want us to talk about Kamala Harris inching ahead in the polls after beating him like a drum on the debate stage. Like the new national poll out just this morning from NBC News showing Harris leading Trump 49-44. Or the number in that same poll that shows her favorability rising more quickly than any politician since George W. Bush after 9/11. Or the one in that same poll that shows voters increasingly see her as the candidate of change. And he doesn't want us to talk about how he's too chicken to debate Harris again after she accepted an invitation from CNN just yesterday. He certainly doesn't want us to talk about his dangerous and unpopular opposition to abortion rights and the preventable deaths we are all learning about in Georgia. I mean, he literally posted this weekend in all caps, telling women that if he wins, quote, you will no longer be thinking about abortion. He was apparently so pleased with that ridiculous statement that he repeated it verbatim yesterday in North Carolina.
Women will be happy, healthy, confident, and free. You will no longer be thinking about abortion.
I mean, of course, he doesn't want women thinking about the rights they have lost. And he doesn't want women hearing things like this from Kamala Harris.
These hypocrites want to start talking about this is in the best interest of women and children. Well, where you been? Where you been when it comes to taking care of the women and children of America? Where you been? How dare they? How dare they?
To state perhaps the obvious, that is not a fight that Donald Trump can win. He also doesn't want us to talk about the overt effort from his supporters in key states to tamper with the election if they don't like the outcome. That's exactly what the Trump-friendly election board in Georgia did on Friday when they ordered the hand counting of ballots, a move that is likely to cause complete chaos and potentially delay the reporting of results in a very critical state. And guys, Trump definitely does not want you talking about his hand-picked guy running for governor in North Carolina, Mark Robinson. You know, the guy who, according to CNN, called himself a black Nazi on a porn site, and who, according to the Washington Post, praised Mein Kampf on that same site. And while Robinson denies making those comments, the reporting is pretty airtight. And trust me, those comments are just the tip of the iceberg. So yeah, Trump wants attention, but he wants it on his rhetoric, not his record, on his words, but not their consequences, because the consequences are a town like Springfield, Ohio, getting torn apart, a Republican Party represented by guys like Mark Robinson, and a country where women die waiting for medical care. That is what Donald Trump really does not want us talking about. But as voters begin voting, and they are, and election day gets closer and closer, and it is, that is where our focus should be, and exactly what we are going to be talking about here on this show. Joining me now is Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia. Senator, I'm so thrilled to be talking with you. There's so much I want to ask you about, but the eyes of the nation really are on Georgia right now, as you know. And I just gave a brief overview of what the state election board just did last week. There'll be more next week. You've said they are trying to set up a scenario in which they could refuse to certify an election whose results they don't like. That sounds a lot to me like people should be prepared out there for Trump and his team to try to overturn the will of the voters in Georgia again if he loses, like they did last time. Is that right? Is that what we should expect?
I'm very concerned, Jen. All of us should remember that famous phone call, a man from Florida calling into Georgia saying he needed 11,780 votes. He didn't get it. And apparently, these members of the State Board of Elections, whom he called pit bulls, who are out there doing his bidding and trying to create a scenario in which they can declare by fiat who the winner of Georgia is. Listen, I've seen this up close. You know, I've won in Georgia 2 elections. My name's been on the ballot 5 times in less than 3 years. They saw the anatomy of my win during my first election, how we won in the runoff. And so going into the runoff this last time, I had to sue the state officials of Georgia just so that Georgia voters could vote that first weekend of the runoff. This is how voter suppression happens. Undermine votes a little bit here, a little bit there. The news that Georgia voters ought to be paying attention to is this. The fact that they are doing this means that they know we're winning. They know that the momentum is with Kamala Harris. And this effort to turn the democracy on its head so that rather than the voters picking their representatives, the folks who are running it to pick their voters, it won't stand. We're going to be vigilant in court, and we're going to turn our people out.
It is, and I know you've dealt with these tactics before, so you're the perfect person to talk to about this. There are a couple of Republicans in the state of Georgia who have expressed concern about what could happen here. A lawyer for Brad Raffensperger, the state attorney general. Now, you know best if those are just words or if they'd actually take actions. If they wanted to prevent this from happening, what could they do?
Well, I think we need to see more action from the state officials here. And yes, I'm paying attention because, again, I've been through this history. But the fact that you have county officials, both Democrats and Republicans, saying that this is a mess, saying that we can't do what you're asking us to do, saying that this insisting on counting votes by hand is not only going to delay our ability to certify, but it certainly, the data shows it doesn't increase accuracy, it decreases accuracy. Look, I'm old enough to remember Florida in 2000, and we all saw we all saw the mess that was, and we don't need that here again in Georgia. So we will continue to press the issue, but I want to be clear for the folks who are watching me this morning. The whole purpose of voter suppression really is to so demoralize the electorate or parts of the electorate that you don't even bother. And for those who are watching and are wondering, well, what can I do about this? I'll tell you what you can do. You can show up. You can show up and say you're not going to squeeze my voice out of the democracy, that I have a right to cast my vote and for my vote to be counted. And showing up in massive numbers, that's the way you respond.
I'm so happy to hear you say that to people, because I think people hear this, and yes, it is a form of voter suppression, which is important to state again and again. I want to ask you about something else that may sound familiar to you, which is Trump aligning himself with a person who should have been disqualified from running for office, and that is, you know who I'm going to ask you about, Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee for governor in North Carolina, and especially the ways, given your background and your history and your current role as a religious leader, in which Dr. Martin Luther King's name has come up in this whole scandal. I mean, in addition to everything else, CNN found that Robinson made a series of posts denigrating Dr. King, calling him a commie bastard, calling him an offensive slur. As you well know, Donald Trump once referred to Robinson as Martin Luther King on steroids. You will actually stand today at the same pulpit where Martin Luther King preached. You have a long history in the state of Georgia. I just want to know what you make of all of this and how they're talking about his legacy.
I can tell you, as the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. served, that Mark Robinson is no Martin Luther King Jr. He is the antithesis of everything that Dr. King represented. He is white supremacy in blackface, as he talks about his desire to bring slavery back. I mean, this talk is way beyond the pale, calling himself a black Nazi. These are his words. And I think that the people of North Carolina need to take note of the fact that this is Donald Trump's candidate. This is who he keeps pushing and encouraging. This is who he thinks should represent them. But Donald Trump has a long history of this. He tried this in my race. This is not the first time he has put forward a black candidate who is unfit and unqualified to serve, with the cynical notion that somehow the electorate will be confused about who this person represents. The people of North Carolina deserve better. They've got real issues that they're trying to address. And they're going to see through Mark Robinson just in the same way that the people of Georgia saw through my opponent.
the last time I spent some time with you down in Georgia last October, and we talked a lot about the work you've done having interfaith conversations, even as a pastor yourself in the Ebenezer Baptist Church. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, this week, Donald Trump said that if he loses in November, the Jewish people, these are his words, to your point, the Jewish people would have a lot to do with the loss. To me, it sounds like he's setting up Jewish Americans to be scapegoats. It's incredibly divisive. You're a religious leader. What was your reaction to that? And what do you want people out there to know when they hear divisive comments like that?
Well, it's an old anti-Semitic trope that he was using, ironically, at an event supposedly to address the problem of anti-Semitism. It just shows you the ways in which Donald Trump is out of touch. And I met with Jewish leaders, a group of Jewish leaders, this past Friday, and they were just shaking their heads because this is an old ploy, an old trope of accusing Jewish folk that somehow they're behind the scenes, pulling strings, doing things. This is who Donald Trump is. He's got so much bigotry, so much anti-Semitism, so much racism, so much misogyny in his heart that it comes out. You know, forgive me, I'm on my way to church. Jesus said that, you know, what's in you will come out. And here we're watching his words demonstrate time and time again who he is. We know who Donald Trump is. This election is about who we are as an American people. And I still believe in the American promise, e pluribus unum, out of many one. I still believe that God is known by many names, worshiped in many houses. I believe in this democracy, this experiment where people of various faith traditions and people who claim no faith at all but operate from a place of moral courage and basic dignity and decency can build a greater country, a beloved community, as Dr. King called it, and push us closer towards our ideals. We're not going back. And we're going to send this 78-year-old retired president quietly into the night and move forward into the future.